Hi everyone, my name's Sebastian. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but I guess life has a funny way of proving you wrong. I'm 22, and until recently, I thought I had a pretty decent grip on what a healthy relationship looked like. I work in tech, I'm fairly independent, and I like my quiet weekends. But my ex, Casey, well, she rewrote all my definitions of unreasonable behavior and entitlement. Casey and I met during a late-night coffee meetup for a project. At first, she seemed fun, spontaneous, and genuinely interested in me. Our first few months were easy. We had routines, inside jokes, and I genuinely felt like she cared about my boundaries. But things started to change slowly, almost imperceptibly, until one night, it all became crystal clear. It was a Thursday evening. We were sitting in her apartment, just the two of us, eating takeout. I'd been scrolling through social media when I noticed a pattern in her interactions, liking and commenting on a bunch of other guys' posts, some of them really flirty. I mentioned it casually at first. "Hey, do you notice how often you comment on Alex's pictures?" I said. Alex was a guy she'd known in college. She laughed, waved it off, and said, "Oh, come on, I'm just being friendly. You're overreacting." I tried to brush it off for a while, hoping it was just social media behavior, but it didn't stop. Then came the texts from random guys. Nothing explicit at first, just small talk. But I started to feel uncomfortable, like my trust was being chipped away bit by bit. Finally, one evening, she leaned back on her couch with that infuriatingly calm smile and said, "Sebastian, you're being dramatic. You're overreacting if you don't want me flirting with other girls." I froze. I wanted to ask if she realized she'd just compared my discomfort to something trivial. But instead, I said something I'll never forget. "Then go flirt." The silence that followed was heavy. She laughed nervously at first, like she thought I was joking. But I wasn't. I meant every word. That night, I barely slept. I felt something shift inside me, a mix of disbelief, hurt, and a quiet fury. I realized I didn't just want to step back. I wanted a clean break, not just emotionally, but physically. By morning, I was out the door. I didn't tell her where I was going. I didn't ask for permission or debate it with her. I signed a lease, 2 states away. I didn't want to just leave the relationship behind. I wanted to make a statement, something she couldn't ignore or manipulate me out of. Packing my car, I thought about how often she had dismissed my feelings, how she twisted situations to make me feel like the unreasonable one. And for the first time, I felt free from that constant second-guessing. I told myself I wasn't running. I was reclaiming my life. It wasn't until the next morning, driving hours away, that my phone started blowing up. Casey was calling. I didn't answer at first, not wanting to give in. The messages piled up, pleading, confused, trying to twist words, claiming she'd never meant to hurt me, and that she was just being herself. By the time I arrived at my new apartment, I was calm, detached, and ready. I grabbed my keys, snapped a picture of them lying on the counter, and sent it to her with no message. It was this silent declaration. I was gone. And then came the texts, the calls, the desperate begging. I knew she wouldn't let this go quietly. I knew she was the kind of person who thrived on trying to control people until she broke them. But for once, I wasn't letting her. That's when things started escalating in ways I hadn't predicted. Little manipulations at first, then full-blown attempts to guilt me, and even attempts to make others involved in my life pick sides. She didn't just want to be with me. She wanted me to grovel, to justify, to beg for forgiveness. And I wasn't about to do any of that. The tension reached a boiling point when I got a message from her that wasn't just manipulative, it was calculated. It was clear she had started planning her next move, something big enough to try and pull me back or ruin the sense of control I had just claimed. I didn't answer Casey for the rest of that day. I didn't open any of her texts, didn't pick up when she called. I just unpacked boxes, organized my new apartment, and tried to focus on the fact that I had done something good for myself. Finally, when evening came and the sunlight slanted through the blinds, I allowed myself to breathe without guilt. But that relief didn't last. Around 9 that night, my phone buzzed again, this time with a message from someone else entirely. Her younger brother, Eli. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but apparently she had used him as a pawn. Sebastian, Casey's really upset. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to call him and explain everything. But I knew exactly what his role was. He was loyal to her in a way that made him almost dangerous. He'd take her side no matter what, twisting situations to make me look like the villain. So I typed back cautiously. I'm not sure what you mean. I'm just starting a new chapter. I don't want drama. His reply came almost immediately, almost frantic. Casey is saying you abandoned her, that you don't care about her at all. She's crying. She says this is all your fault. That's when I realized the scale of the problem. She wasn't just upset. She was mobilizing everyone around her to prove a point, not just to me, but to anyone who might intervene. I started to anticipate her moves. She wasn't going to stop until she'd either drag me back into her orbit or convinced everyone I was the monster in this story. The next day, things escalated further. I woke up to several emails from her, each more manipulative than the last. She was writing long paragraphs about how heartless I was and how I could ruin her life. She was even hinting that she might involve people in my new city, friends, neighbors, maybe even my workplace. It was clear she hadn't even paused to think that I could have a life independent of her. By the end of the morning, I realized ignoring her wasn't enough. She was aggressive, methodical, and she thrived on control. So I made a choice. If she wanted a game, I was going to play too, but on my terms. The first step was ensuring my space was mine. I changed locks, updated security codes, and made sure my lease didn't have loopholes for her interference. I also made quiet, subtle moves to distance myself socially. Friends who might unknowingly report back to her were kept in the dark about my new city. Everything was designed to cut off the channels she relied on to manipulate situations. Meanwhile, the texts kept coming. Some were directly from her, pleading, hinting, guilting. Others were indirect, mutual friends passing along messages. Eli trying to mediate in ways that only reinforced her narrative. I answered none of them, letting them pile in silence. The more they tried, the more I realized that my patience and composure were my strongest weapons. A week in, I started to notice subtle patterns in her strategy. She wasn't just upset. She was creating a storyline where I was the villain who had run away and abandoned her. Her manipulation wasn't reckless. It was precise. And suddenly, I understood that if I wanted to reclaim not just my life, but my peace of mind, I couldn't just run away physically. I had to anticipate her every move. It started small. I noticed a message from a neighbor she had somehow contacted, claiming they needed to check in on me. I ignored it, of course, but it confirmed my suspicion. She was willing to reach into my life, even in a city where she had no standing, to get attention or provoke a reaction. Then came the direct attempt. I opened my mailbox one afternoon and found a handwritten note slipped between my lease documents. In neat cursive, it read, "Sebastian, I can't believe you're doing this. You know I can't just let this go. Please, talk to me, Casey." I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to crumple it and throw it away, but I realized it was actually an advantage. She had revealed her method. She was relying on persistence and the hope that I would crumble. The only way to beat her was to use the information she had exposed against her. That's when I began thinking ahead. I didn't just want to ignore her. I wanted to reclaim the narrative, to show her that control didn't belong to her anymore. I started planning small steps, subtle reminders to friends and coworkers that my life was separate. A few strategic posts on social media that were visible to people in our circle without being overt. Nothing malicious, just clear signals that I was thriving and unbothered. But the real turning point came unexpectedly. I got a call from a mutual friend, someone who had always tried to mediate between us. Their tone was hesitant, almost scared. "Sebastian, I don't know if you should be alone with this. Casey, she's saying things that don't make sense. She's escalating." My stomach sank. Escalating how? I had seen manipulation, passive aggression, guilt trips, but this sounded different, dangerous. By the time I hung up, I knew one thing. Whatever game she thought she was playing, it was no longer just about winning a fight or proving a point. She had crossed a line into calculated escalation. And I was going to need more than patience and distance if I wanted to come out of this without losing everything I'd worked to reclaim. I didn't know exactly what she had planned next, but I could feel it coming. I spent the night planning, thinking, pacing, making lists of what she could possibly do and how I could turn it to my advantage. That was the moment I realized this wasn't going to be a simple breakup story. This was going to be a battle of strategy, patience, and subtle manipulation. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to fight back. By morning, I had decided on my first move. It was subtle, invisible to anyone who didn't know the full picture, but it would send a clear message to her. I was no longer a pawn in her story. I wasn't reacting out of anger, fear, or guilt. I was acting deliberately, and she wouldn't be able to touch it. And then it happened. I got the first direct, undeniable sign that she was about to escalate in ways I hadn't anticipated. A knock at the door, just past midnight. Firm, deliberate, impatient. Whoever it was didn't just want to talk. They wanted a reaction. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched from the blinds as shadows moved outside. Just enough to make me realize that everything had changed. Casey wasn't just upset. She was dangerous in her persistence, and I had a decision to make. Retreat further or step forward and take control before she could manipulate anyone else into her game. I didn't open the door. I didn't even make a sound. I just waited, my heart pounding, but my mind clearer than it had been in weeks. Casey had always thrived on the immediate reaction, whether it was an argument, a panic, or guilt. She fed on it. I realized in that moment that if I didn't give her that satisfaction, I had the upper hand. The knock repeated, heavier this time. I could hear her voice, muffled but insistent. "Sebastian, come on, don't do this. I just want to talk." I stepped back from the blinds and grabbed my phone. I called my friend, the one who had warned me about her escalation. "I think she's outside. She might try something stupid. Can you stay on the line?" "Of course," they said, their voice tense. "Just stay calm." I took a deep breath. Calm was exactly what she would never expect. Calm and deliberate. I slipped on a jacket and opened the door, carefully. Just a crack, enough to slip a camera phone into my pocket that I'd set to record. I needed proof of whatever she was about to do. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Sebastian, thank God." I held up a hand. Not a word, just listen. Her face faltered, just slightly. She wasn't used to this. She was used to me apologizing, negotiating, explaining myself. Not this silence, this composure. "I know exactly what you've been doing," I said slowly, mobilizing friends, sending messages, trying to make me look like the villain. "I saw your note, your calls, even the texts through Eli. I know everything." Her smile faltered, replaced by a mix of shock and frustration. "Sebastian, Stop." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence itself was heavier than anything I could have shouted. "You want to control me. You want me to panic, to beg, to come crawling back. But I'm not doing that. Not now. Not ever." She tried to step closer, to reach for my arm. I moved back, deliberately, letting her realize that I was physically and emotionally untouchable. "You need to leave," I said. Her lips pressed together, and for a second I almost felt pity. Almost. Then she turned, storming away with a sharp, frustrated glance back. But I knew this wasn't over. I could feel it in the way she moved. Every step was deliberate, like she was planning the next escalation even as she left. That night, I started executing a plan I had been quietly assembling ever since I moved. I called the landlord, quietly confirming that any further attempts to visit the apartment without permission would be trespassing. I set up discreet cameras at the entrances. I sent a few subtle, innocuous messages to friends who might be influenced by her, letting them know I was fully aware of her manipulation and that I wasn't responding. But my real move came the following day. I had discovered a pattern in her behavior. She thrived on visibility. She wanted to know everything I did, where I went, who I talked to, and she wanted me to respond to her every move. So I decided to turn that against her. I created an entirely new routine, small but deliberate. I posted photos that were carefully neutral but visible to mutual friends. Coffee at a local cafe, books in the library, a scenic run along the river. Nothing personal, nothing dramatic, but it worked. Within hours, I could tell she had seen them. She began sending messages through mutual friends, trying to provoke me, asking why I hadn't responded. I didn't. I let her spiral. Then came the clever part. I found out she had a favorite cafe near my old city, a place she went almost daily. I called ahead, using a fake name, and asked the manager to save a table for me, discreetly recording the reservation under her observation. The manager agreed. I made it sound completely coincidental. I was visiting for work, just passing through. The next day, I went to the cafe. Sure enough, she was there. She hadn't expected me, hadn't planned for me to show up in public. Her eyes went wide, a mix of disbelief and panic crossing her face. I sat at the reserved table, calmly sipping my coffee, pretending not to notice her. And then I sent a photo back to a mutual chat we shared, showing me in the cafe with a caption that read simply, "Thinking of you." I didn't even mention her name. I didn't need to. Within minutes, her network of friends, including Eli, started pinging me, asking if I had seen her reaction. Apparently, she had turned red, stumbled over words, tried to make herself invisible, and was muttering to herself. I had turned her own tools, visibility, attention, manipulation, against her. But the real coup de grace was still coming. I had been quietly gathering proof of all her manipulations, texts, emails, notes, and recordings from the night she had come to my door. I knew that at the right moment, I could reveal the full picture, not just to her, but to anyone in her circle who had been unwittingly dragged into her schemes. And that moment was fast approaching. Then, just as I thought I was in control, I got a message that made my stomach drop. It wasn't from Casey or Eli or even a mutual friend. It was from someone completely unexpected, her older sister Mara, and her tone was icy, calculated. "Sebastian, I think you've underestimated Casey. You're making a mistake by thinking this is a game you can control. I'd be careful if I were you." That message changed everything. I realized that Casey's manipulations weren't just limited to her. She had backup. She had family ready to step in, ready to escalate things further. And now they knew I was pushing back. I could feel the tension coiled tighter around me. Every move I made from now on had to be perfect, deliberate, and untraceable. One misstep, and it wouldn't just be Casey. I would be facing an entire family determined to make me look like the villain, to drag me back under their control. And that's when I started planning the big move, the part of my strategy that would not just stop Casey, but completely dismantle her control over me, her network, and her narrative. The one move that would make her realize, finally, that I was no longer hers to manipulate. But I couldn't rush it. I had to wait, observe, and let her escalate on her own, because the best revenge isn't reactive. The best revenge is patient, precise, and inevitable. By the next weekend, I had everything lined up. Every small post, Every quiet maneuver, every subtle redirection had prepared me for this moment. I didn't know exactly how Casey and her family would respond, but I knew one thing. When the first domino fell, there would be no stopping the chain reaction. And then, as I sat in my apartment, quietly reviewing all my proof and my plans, my phone buzzed. I saw it immediately, Casey. And the message wasn't pleading. It wasn't confused. It wasn't begging. It was sharp, pointed, and chilling. Sebastian, you think you're done with me? Think again. You haven't seen anything yet. I stared at her last message for a long time. Sharp, pointed, and threatening, just like I expected. But instead of panicking, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Casey and her family thought they could intimidate me, manipulate me, make me doubt myself. They had no idea how methodical I could be when pushed to the edge. I spent that night carefully reviewing everything I had collected, the messages, the notes, the texts from Eli, and the recordings from the night she had come to my door. I organized it all chronologically, so there was a clear, undeniable trail of manipulation, coercion, and deliberate attempts to control my life. Every single person she had tried to drag into her scheme, mutual friends, Eli, Mara, even the cafe manager, had left digital breadcrumbs, unintentional confirmations that she had orchestrated this entire drama. The next morning, I drafted a single, deliberate message. It wasn't long, it wasn't emotional, and it didn't beg for anything. It simply laid out the facts in a way no one could dispute. Screenshots of messages, recordings of her visits, proof of her lies, and her attempts to involve friends and family in controlling me. I sent it not to her directly, but to everyone in our mutual circles, friends, colleagues, and even her extended family who had been quietly siding with her. Almost immediately, responses started coming in. Shock, disbelief, and questions flooded in. People who had thought I was overreacting were now reading the evidence. People who had been unsure suddenly saw exactly what had been happening. Casey's deliberate, relentless attempts to control and manipulate me. Eli sent a short, confused message asking if I was serious, clearly realizing he had been used as a pawn. Mara, who had tried to intimidate me, sent nothing. I didn't expect her to. The silence spoke volumes. Then came the final part of my plan. I set up a simple meeting with Casey, somewhere public, and let her know that I would be there, calm and collected. She arrived, of course, expecting some sort of dramatic confrontation. Me groveling, me apologizing, me begging to reconcile. But I didn't even glance at her when she approached. Instead, I handed her a printed folder. Inside were the same proofs I had sent to everyone else. I didn't say a word, just left it on the table, stood up, and walked away. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I didn't respond to any messages for days, letting the consequences unfold naturally. Within a week, I started hearing from mutual friends. Casey had become isolated, her credibility completely dismantled. Eli had distanced himself entirely, realizing she had manipulated him. Mara had tried to salvage her reputation among family and friends, but her involvement in Casey's schemes was now public knowledge. Casey herself tried to contact me a few more times, but each attempt only reinforced her own downfall. Every message she sent was met with silence, and every attempt to twist the narrative now backfired, because the truth was already out. People who had once doubted me now reached out with apologies, confirmations, and support. In the end, it wasn't about revenge in the petty sense. It wasn't about humiliation for the sake of pride. It was about reclaiming control over my own life and exposing manipulation before it could reach further. Casey and her family lost their grip, not because I lashed out, but because I anticipated, observed, and acted deliberately. They were the villains, and everyone around them finally saw it. Now, a few months later, I'm fully settled into my new city. My apartment feels like my own sanctuary. I've rebuilt friendships on my terms, established boundaries that no one can cross, and more importantly, I've proved to myself that manipulation and control aren't permanent. Casey is still trying to recover her reputation among some remaining friends, but no one who matters is listening. Eli has blocked her. Mara is quietly apologizing to people she tried to influence. And Casey, she's left alone in her own web of entitlement, unable to reach the one person she tried to control. I check my phone now, and it's quiet. No messages, no attempts to manipulate, no threats. It's exactly how it should be. Calm, controlled, and completely mine. And for the first time in months, I can breathe without guilt, without fear, and without anyone trying to dictate my life. I didn't just leave a toxic situation. I dismantled it entirely. And that, to me, was the only kind of justice that mattered. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments. If you liked this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.